morning, everyone, or afternoon, or evening, or wherever it is that you are. Where is Linda O'Donnell? Can you just like wave so everybody sees her? Linda is my co-author extraordinaire. Now, I have a little surprise for her today. Our proof copy arrived. It's here. Dun, dun, dun,
Ah,
dun. So yay, so now we proof the copy before we can, thank you, Wanda. I see your little hat going up. I know it's such an exciting day as an author when the proof copy comes of the print version. So, oh, I see lots of hearts and things. That's so nice. Okay, that's my just little, hey, what do you got there? Richard has a book up. See, he has a proof copy. He knows that it's just an amazing day. So now we're, of course, going to go through and proof it. Then Linda's going to get the second proof copy and she's going to go through and proof it. And then we'll get it published. So that's where we are. We still have seven people in the waiting room. So let me just catch up and go away from all just my own excitement because it's fun. We have a seriously good crowd coming here, Deborah. Look at this filling up and look at everybody who's got their video on because everyone knows it just makes me happy when I can see some faces. Fantastic. So today, we've got Deborah Morton, and I asked her to come and talk about the Skeleton Blurb because Deborah, she's a Fictionary certified story coach editor, and a developmental advisor, but she really gets the Skeleton Blurb, and she shared some work that she had been doing through her own business, and I thought, it might be really great to have a different take on this compared to how we present it at Fictionary. And so I asked Deborah to come and do this for us. So I'm going to turn it over to Deborah and she can just let her rip.
thank you, Kristina. And thank you, everybody, for coming. I'm so excited that you're here, especially those that know about a skeleton blurb, have been using a skeleton blurb. But this is what I call I'm going to share it, the skeleton blurb on steroids. So I've taken this idea of a skeleton blurb and expanded on its what it can do for you kind of thing. And I want to, whoops, oh dear, I just completely changed my way I can see, and now I can't see you. Oh, here we go. I mean, I can't see my my slides. So I'm going to be going through this pretty quickly because we've just got a half hour here and I want to make sure we get it all in. But I also have a PDF copy of all the slides. So if something goes over your head, you can reference that later. I'll put it in the chat. So this is Skeleton Blurb on steroids, and let's get rolling. So we all know initially what I think we all know initially what a skeleton blurb is. The protagonist must, and you will see that I have put that in capitalized and bold print. That is a demand from you as the writer to the protagonist that they must complete a goal, otherwise the stakes will happen. And in this particular version, what I do is I marry the storyline, which is the internal motivation for the story, with the plot line, which is the external driver. Because every story needs movement, every scene needs movement. That's that plot line that goes on. But the motivation is that internal um, drive, that internal motivation to make that story happen in the first place. That's the big why. So what is a skeleton blurb? It's a personalized tool to hone the intention of your story. This is when you create this blurb, you're going to be really bringing it down to what is the full intention of this story in the first place. And it also are your guardrails to keep you on track and not get lost in the plot forest. And we're going to talk about that a little bit further down in the line, what that really means for you. So what a skeleton blurb is not, is something that you're going to put on your book cover. This is your personalized tool. And in my own opinion, the skeleton blurb is the most powerful tool that you've got in your toolbox if you use it. It's not something that's going to be included in the query letter. This is for you and you alone, with the exception of maybe your editor. It's not something that will impede you from being a pantser or from following your outline. And the other thing I wanted to say is that it's yours and yours alone, with the exception of the editor, and actually it becomes a whole nother level of tool when you give it to your editor so that they know exactly what your intention was and what your guardrails were when you were working within it. So let's move on. How do I use the skeleton blurb? You can use it to help get your story started if you haven't done it yet. It can help you kind of put some shape to what it is you want to write in the first place. You can use it to pressure test every scene as you go along, and we're going to talk about what that actually means. You can use it to help weave your story together. So let's say you've got your main plot, and then you've got your subplots, and then you've got your little thread that's tying it all together. Every single scene, whether your protagonist is in that scene or not, the skeleton blurb still needs to be relevant. So you would still pressure test scenes that the protagonist is not in, and it helps you to weave your story together so that those subplots do relate to the main plot of the story. It will help you avoid having to kill your darlings because it's keeping you on inside a containment, so to speak, so that you're not writing things that are outside of the story that don't need to be there, and then you have to go ahead and cut those scenes anyway. It will help you become a more efficient writer. And that's one great example that we just said is how you can be more efficient, because why write stuff if you're going to turn around and cut it out later? Um, and it also, you can check your scenes after you've completed your draft so that you can make sure that before you even start your revisions, you can go through and make sure everything that's in there is really something that should be in there. So when can I start using it? And there's no time like the present. It doesn't matter when, either before your story, after your story, or during your story. You can create a skeleton blurb and start using it. You can backtrack over stuff you've already done and use it to go forward. There's really no way around saying that I'm too late. I can't use this. So let's talk about how to build a skeleton blurb. The protagonist must, and again, there it is in big bold letters, achieve a goal because you said so as the writer. Otherwise, these stakes will happen, which you created also as the writer. Now, there's a sweet spot for a skeleton blurb. And it needs to be between 15 and 25 words. And let me tell you, I've done hundreds of these now. And this is the place where if you have less than 15 words, it can allow you to accept too much into the story. And that is where you kind of can go out of your guardrails and write things that shouldn't be in there in the first place. But more than 25 words may not allow you to accept enough into your story because every scene has to relate to the skeleton blurb. So if you've got it narrowed down so tight, you might not even be able to get what you want into your story. So you're looking for the most compressed version of the intent of your story. And whoops, I'm outside and the outside is getting to me. I just had a bug land on my glasses. One pitfall to avoid is never put your protagonist in the driver's seat. Don't forget that you are the one that ordered them to do this goal, you've created this goal and they must do it. All right, so let's talk about the combining of the story, where the story's going and why. Every story has two lines. There's a storyline, which is all the internal stuff, the conceptual stuff, all the feelings. That is the motivation. That is the big fat why you're writing the story in the first place. The example of internal version of this storyline is an example of the internal version of the protagonist must find their goal. They must find their inner strengths. Oh, let me back up a minute. I am just completely, I can't see this side of the thing because my little thing is in the way. Here we go. Sorry about that. So an example of an internal version is that the protagonist must find their inner strength, otherwise they won't find their true potential. Okay, that's just purely internal stuff. But if you don't have any movement and none of that creates movement by itself, then the story just kind of sits there. It doesn't do anything. So you need the plot line, which is the external and active version. This is the movement that every scene needs. This is the driver that takes you from point A to point B. Example for an external version would be protagonists must find the cause of the earthquakes. Otherwise, they can't stop them and save the planet. Okay, so let's marry those two things together. And what does that sound like if we do? The protagonist must dig deep in his geographic knowledge and find the cause of the earthquakes. Otherwise, the people of Earth will die from the tremors. This is 25 words, and it's exactly the right amount to create your particular story, right? This can't be set off and somebody else can use it in a different story. This is about your story and your story alone. So let's just talk briefly about some goals and stakes. In the married version, the goal must always be external, but it reflects the internal feelings, and both motivates the drive for your story forward. And in the stakes also must be external, but they also will reflect those internal feelings. And this creates the conclusion of the story. So again, both goals and stakes need both internal and external to make it work. Genre-driven examples. So remember, you're looking for that sweet spot of 15 to 25 words. So here's an example based on genre and how you can improve your blurb. So we're going to start out with some external to external genres, which are crime, mystery, thriller, action, adventure. In this one, the detective must find the killer, otherwise he'll kill again. It's 10 words, and look at how much you can add into that story. Look at how you could just pick that sentence up and give it to the next person writing a crime story, and it's going to fit that too, right? So how do you modify this to hone in for your individual story? The detective must find the killer's signature motive. Otherwise, he risks the community at large. Now we know that the killer has a motive or, has a signature to his motive, and there's a community involved. It's 15 words, but it's still kind of right on the edge. It's in the sweet spot. You're not going to send this off to the next guy that's writing another book that it's going to fit exactly. But getting inside that sweet spot is where you really want to be. So this one could still even further be honed in, but this is what I'm talking about that honing in to get it to fit just your story. So let's move on to a different genre where we've got literary fiction and memoir. This one usually starts out with something that's external that the character is going to need to do to change something within. So external to internal is what you're really kind of looking for. Laura must move to Hawaii, otherwise she'll never find happiness. It's 11 words. It's not quite there. It doesn't really tell you enough. You can fit all kinds of things into your story that could take you off into Alice in Wonderland. So you want to add some more things in here that's going to make this your story. Laura must move to Hawaii, otherwise she'll never find satisfying success in her career as a travel guide. Now here's 18 words. It's still on the light side of the sweet spot, but the reason this one gets away with it is because she's moving to Hawaii, which is a travel destination spot. And if she's a travel guide, this is a perfect place for her to be. So it makes sense that it can be a little bit on the lighter side. Exposing the external motivation to the stakes creates a more concrete driver, and at the same time, it marries her internal motivation. So, what's next? We talked about that pressure test. What does that really mean? So once you've created your skeleton blurb and it's created for your story and just your story alone, you can hold it up to your scene and ask, does your scene relate to your blurb? If the answer is yes, then great. You're good to go. Move on to the next scene. However, if the answer is no, then you have two choices. One is to modify the scene so that it does say yes. And if you can't make that happen, then your only other alternative is to cut the scene. Because if you have scenes in your book that are not related to the story blurb, then they're not related to the story goal and its intent, and they need to go. So if you have to cut the scene, it's better to know now than later. So that's why it's good to use your skeleton blurb to get to that point. And that is my quick and fast thank you so much. And let me quit sharing. Still have time for some questions, and I'm going to get into the chat and send this PDF version to you.
Perfect. Deborah, I can also attach the PDF version to the replay. And
Oh,
when people
okay,
get the
will do.
replay, then they don't have to worry about it right now. If you put it in the chat, then I'll click it so I have it, and then I'll attach it to make it easy for everybody when the replay comes out.
Yes. Thank you. Because I did want to say this is not a secret. This is something that I want everybody to know. I want, tell your friends, this is all something that needs to get shoved around. I think that I mean, when I figured out the skeleton blurb and I understood the skeleton blurb, what I could really do with it, my writing shot off in a direction I never expected. And my writing became not only more efficient, but just more focused and better. And so I'm just a huge advocate for using the skeleton blurb. Does anyone have
Yes,
questions at this
there
point?
is. Hang on, I'll just get in here. So, Deb, Frank, awesome question. In a romance, is the external blurb more important or the internal blurb more important?
In the romance, as Linda she's the goddess of this, and she is actually the one person in the world that was able to get me to move on my position on this, is that the internal is what's most important. And for the romance, the internal is most important, but the internal can't move by itself. It has to have something that's going to drive it forward. So there still has to be an external to it. But when you're writing that married version, you get both that are in there. And so your skeleton blurb for whether you're writing a romance all the way up to a horror is going to still have both an internal and an external motivator and driver, depending on the genre, depends on whether that comes first or second in your skeleton blurb, so that that internal one with romance will be front and center.
Yeah, and it gets even harder when you're combining genres, right? Where you're doing, say, a romance with fantasy element. Well, now you've got to put all of that into what we call a combined skeleton blurb because you need it
Yes.
all. Natalie has an
Yes.
interesting question. She says, "What do we need to do to turn the skeleton blurb into a log line?"
Ah, absolutely nothing, because your skeleton blurb is your personal tool that is for your eyes only. And the log line, you can take what you're doing is you're honing your intent. So what you can do is figure out what your intent is in that story, which is something that you're doing for the skeleton blurb, but it's not going to be written in the same way. You want your log line to be the snappy piece that's going to attract other people's attention, whereas the skeleton blurb is your tool to keep you on track. So they
Mhm.
do two completely different things.
Yeah, and yet you might also find too with the skeleton blurb, don't be nervous about writing it at the beginning because it can change as you write your story or as you add your secondary plot. So let's say you write your romance first and then you decide
Mhm.
you want to add in a fantasy element. Well, you can go back and update your skeleton blurb. It grows with you because it's just for you. It doesn't matter. And
Mhm.
Alexandra says, mine just changed at 62,000 words into writing her novel. And of course, so as you write, your brain just keeps adding things. The key is to go back to what Deborah said at the beginning. How many words are we allowed here? 25. And so just because you make your story complex and add things doesn't give you the freedom to then go, well, I'll just keep adding things to my skeleton blurb so every scene is now related to it. You got to remember it's the other way around. That's really important.
Yes.
And it's
Yes.
tempting. Um, I mean, I get it. Like it's totally tempting because when you're writing, it's a very artistic process, and you're going to go off in different ways. My book right now is a combined romance fantasies, which is why I'm talking about romance and fantasy because it's very interesting to me how it all works. The favorite word today was plot forest from your presentation. Randy just said you were lost in the plot forest. So you said it that really well in your presentation. And now it's coming back full circle. Yes, the plot forest. Any other questions for Deborah? Lots of great comments about how fabulous this is. Brandy says sometimes you have to write the story to realize what the story you were writing was. That does happen too. Everybody has a different, and every book you write is probably going to be different. Sherry says currently reading I think it's Chrome's. Anyway, Corn's Story Genius, and this presentation highlights necessary internal and external. Lisa Cron, that's her name. It's not Corn, it's Cron. Um, and so her books, yeah, are really interesting on how all of this works. Okay. Sorry, I'm just scrolling down. Oh, here's a little test from Mark. Steve McCulley. I'm only saying because
Hello.
it was drowned if someone typed. Steve McCulley must regain his memory, otherwise fall into the clutches of evil biotech, not blotch, biotech company. 14 words. Any suggestions there, Deborah?
Let me see. I have to get up to him. Where
So
or
it's
maybe
under
down. I'm
Mark
not sure.
Ingham, and it's Steve McCulley must regain his memory, otherwise fall into the clutches of an evil biotech company.
And how is he going to go about regaining his memory? That's the part that you might want to consider adding in there, because he's got to regain his memory, but okay, how is he going to go about doing that? What does he need to do to regain that memory?
So he has to go through kind of life trials in order to prove that he's capable and he's not going to have a breakdown from remembering. So he
Hmm.
basically has to face fears in order to get his memory back.
Okay, well, then he has to face his fears, which would be a little bit more. It's still not really giving you specific, a specific external to what he needs to do that. Does he, in order to face his fears, where does he need to go on an external level to face those fears, to regain his memory?
There's so specifically around fire, and before he lost his memory, there was a big fire, and to basically face up against that.
So, okay, so he's got some, basically some, um, fire, bad memories around fire, that type of thing. So if that is part of his process that he has to deal with, I don't know if he's doing it through counseling or if he's just doing it on his own. I would hone in on that little section there of what is going to break him through that. In your mind, what is it that is going to break him through that? Because remember, this is your tool. This isn't anybody else's stuff to look at. So you can be as right out there and forward as you want because nobody else is going to see it. And it's what's going to keep you going. So let's say for example, um, he has to he has to uh break his personal now I'm not saying this is how it needs to be written in the blurb, but let's just say he has to break his personal um comfort zone and go see a counselor and maybe go through hypnosis. That's going to be the breakthrough for him. And it's not something that he would normally do. Then that part of what you want him to do is get to that point. So in order for him to get to that point, then you could write in your blurb that he needs to go through hypnosis to learn regain his memories. So that's an external goal for him to have to do is go through hypnosis, and all of your scenes are him, even if they're meeting other people, that's going to meet somebody else that's going to eventually get him to the point that he'll meet the person who's going to be able to hypnotize him and actually fix him, right? So you can still use that in your skeleton blurb to actually get him there. I mean, this is just something off the cuff, but what you want to look for is what is it that he needs to do to um, obtain that goal? What does he have to do to actually get that goal accomplished? And so for him to need to remember it, well, he could just sit in a chair and think hard, or he could go to Los Angeles and stand on one of the stars in the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and that's going to spark something in him. What is it physically that he's going to do in the story that will be that journey that he has to make to get there?
Yep.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Fantastic. Thank you, Deborah. Okay, we're almost out of time, but I'm going to go to one more question because it's a really good one from Linda T. How can I use the pressure test for scenes that don't include my protagonist? For example, the antagonist has his own scenes. How do I relate that back to my blurb?
So, if your antagonist has their own scenes, if they're the antagonist, they're going to be doing everything they can to stop that protagonist from obtaining their goal. So, what is it that is going to relate to how that's, because it doesn't mean that he needs to be taken closer to his goal. It means it needs to relate to how he's going to get there one way or the other. So, if in those antagonistic scenes, what is he doing to keep the protagonist from obtaining his goal? And how will that affect him? Okay, so it has to still have something to do with the protagonist obtaining their goal. Whether is he going to put a roadblock in the way and then what is the protagonist eventually going to have to do to counter that? So it doesn't matter whether they're in the scene or not, it still has to relate to the main story goal.
Yep, all about that story goal. I'm sure Fictionary
Yeah.
people have heard that many, many times. Back to the story goal.
Where's the drill?
I don't know how people write without a skeleton blurb, but I might be biased on that, but I just truly believe in it. And Deborah, thank you so much for coming and talking today. It's really nice to hear about the skeleton blurb from your voice and how consistent the messaging is. And sometimes it's great to learn just by hearing it said a different way. And so I really appreciate you being there. And thank you to everybody else who was here. Once we process the video, it'll come up on replay. You'll all get an email telling you when it's there. And I will add Deborah's PDF to the replay so that anyone who missed this, of course, they get it too. But yay, thank you, Deborah.
Thank you so much, everybody. And you're very welcome, Kristina. Have a wonderful day, folks.